Hello, today I'm just giving you an update on my Ironman exoskeleton strapping system, and we're also going to talk about the legs and the feet. So a bit of an update from last time. Obviously you can see that I've got the arms on, although they're only actually attached with elastic bands at the moment, but that's basically the scaling and the spacing of the pieces. I've also got the cod plate on and the ab plate. At the moment it's kind of temporarily held on at the sides there with some clips because I haven't put the bum plate on yet. When I do, the two are going to interlock at the sides to hold those. However, the front is actually attached with the same magnetic strapping system. This isn't as uncomfortable as it looks. Obviously it needs to be cut down and it also needs to be foam backed, but it basically isn't too uncomfortable to wear. It was really the only place to put those so that the piece latches on. The ab plate is the same, it's just got one socket in it. Obviously that fits quite well with the chest plate, which I still haven't added the third additional socket to. But basically it all seems to fit together quite well. The belt strap does undo here, so for convenience that's not as inconvenient as it seems. So let's just do that back up. Right, I just wanted to do some close-ups on some features of the suit with the exoskeleton on. So obviously, as I've already shown, the chest plate, and if you look in the previous 3 parts to the exoskeleton strapping system, you can see how this is made. But basically, obviously everything's mounted on these magnetic plugs and sockets on a metal undersuit. So I quite like the look of that actually, having those bits of aluminium there. Obviously it's not movie accurate, so what needs to happen is another gold piece will be fitted in there, which I'm going to make out of a piece of sheet material. I'm probably going to leave these pieces showing, so when you look at it from the front it looks like the actual undersuit that you can see when the Iron Man suit is assembled in the movie. Similarly, looking in the sides here, I don't know if you can just see the piece of metal running under the arm, so I quite like having that exposed. I have some other pieces to make. Basically the sides are going to be made out of sheet material, which will come up to meet the ab plate. So all the pieces are going to be there that you'd expect to see in the suit. If you remember from the previous parts, what I'm left with is some straps at each side of the legs here. These are actually they're dog leads from the £1 store, which is basically there to hang the thighs on and the rest of the legs. So we're now going to talk about what I'm going to do about the legs and the feet. I'm actually going to start right at the bottom here and basically building the exoskeleton and fitting the pieces and work my way up to meet the thighs. Right, so my original plan for the shoes was to use these shoes, which are like wetsuit shoes for kite surfing or something, which I've obviously glued some foam all over. The original plan with the foam suit that I made nearly 2 years ago now, here's a foam shoe. It's not particularly great. The plan was to basically sort of glue that onto the foam shoe or cut the pieces out and glue them on all over, and that was going to be it. What I'd actually like to do is build something that's more like the exoskeleton. So it's actually got a proper sole on it and proper hinges at the ankle and sort of straps onto your feet and lower leg, a bit like a snowboard binding. So it actually goes some way towards supporting the shins at least. So I've got one of my plastic shins here. Obviously that fits the boot quite well. The plan is obviously to make, obviously this was moulded off the foam suit as all the other pieces, and if you have a look on my website and you have a look at the other YouTube videos, you can see these plastic pieces being made by moulding from the foam and then casting in polyurethane. So the plan is to do the same with the shoes basically. So the top section here, the front and the back are all going to have moulds made. I've only done one so far, which is for the bridge of the foot there. So that'll be cast in plastic or fiberglass, and then I'll end up with a thin shell that I can detail in a rigid cast, much like the shins and the other rigid pieces from the suit. So obviously I could still go and stick those on the shoes, but in fact what I'm planning to do is take this piece of HDPE, which is basically what they make plastic chopping boards of, It's 10mm thick, basically high density plastic. I've used this in other projects. If you have a look at my Android 11 project, you can see pieces of this being used. This is basically an offcut from that project. So it's quite good material because you can screw a machine screw straight into it without having to tap a hole with a thread, and basically it will just stay there. So I think I've got M4 bolts, and if you drill a M3 or 3.5mm hole, then you can just screw the bolt in and it will stay there. So it makes it quite easy to attach bits of metal and brackets and so on. Plan is going to be to obviously have a piece that's the right size for the shoe, that's sort of cut to the right contours, and have a hinge in it, so that I'm actually going to use one of these door hinges. It's just domestic hinges from a DIY shop. So that'll be roughly on the ball of the foot, where your foot bends, so that'll be divided into two. And then around the ankle, obviously we need a hinge so that your foot can move around. So I'm going to have a hinge either side, but we also need to be able to have side to side movement slightly. So I'm probably going to make those hinges floating. And then the whole thing is going to be strapped on with lots of foam and Velcro. So basically the lower shin and the foot exoskeleton pieces are strapped onto the person, and then the actual shins are going to be divided into two at each side somewhere. And then again I'm going to use the magnetic plugs and sockets, which I've mentioned in the last 3 parts, which are going to hold all of the pieces on. So obviously there'll probably be one on the toe in other places, or some other form of latching mechanism to attach the pieces of the shoe, and then there'll be a rigid piece of metal that runs up the leg at the front and the back for the shin pieces to fit to. I'd also quite like to kind of have them permanently attached with some form of hinge or an opening and closing mechanism that comes together, a bit like in the movie. But we'll see how that works out once I've actually made the exoskeleton and the rigid sole, which are actually comfortable and you can walk in. Then I'll fit the pieces of armour. There'll probably be a rigid hinge at the knee, so and we'll continue the exoskeleton up the leg, and then it will be hooked onto the straps at the thigh, which I just showed you in the previous piece of video. But we'll see how that works out once we get there, and we can also sort out the spacing of the pieces at that point.